Hey there, interwebs. A while ago I posted a video examining the idea that the quarterstaff may be the best weapon for travelers, and I still stand by much of what I said in it. If, however, a quarterstaff isn't really your thing, I have another weapon you may find more agreeable. It's not as inconspicuous as the quarterstaff, but it's more concealable than a sword and flashier than a dagger. What is this miraculous weapon? You're totally not wondering because it's in the title of the video. That's right, it's nunchucks. Before I go any further, let me say, yes, I know the proper Japanese name for them is nunchaku, but the rest of this video is going to be in English, so I'm going to use the most common English name for them. If that really bothers you, take solace in the fact that I won't be calling them nunchucks. They have several advantages over a quarterstaff, and wherever the staff has advantages which they lack, they usually make up for it in other ways. If you haven't watched my original quarterstaff video, go do that now. If you're forgetful, impatient, or just in a hurry, I'll summarize the key points here as a quick recap. 1. It has the potential to strike deadly blows, but doesn't have the same lethality as bladed weapons like swords or polearms. 2. It's conspicuous to your foes and simultaneously inconspicuous to your friends, because anyone who means you harm will likely recognize it as a perfectly viable means of self-defense, but normally it can hide in plain sight as a humble walking stick. 3. It has great accessibility and convenience. A long wooden stick is easy to obtain and carry, and it's still useful outside of combat. Related to that first point, there's something I sort of alluded to in my first video, but which I want to make more clear now before I continue. We already established that staves are generally less lethal than swords, but it was pointed out to me that this might make them more of a deterrent. See, I'd carry a staff because I only want to be able to see brigands off, not kill them like some murder hobo. The brigands might reasonably assume this too. If I draw a sword, they may think, this guy ain't got the guts to waste someone. But if I've got a big pole, they'll think, this guy ain't got the guts to waste someone, but he's probably ready to lay down an ass-whoopin'. And they'd be right. Basically, the humble staff occupies a comfortable middle ground of lethality, but that's what makes it an ideal tool of self-defense for travelers, since they're people who don't want to be caught unarmed if attacked, but they also aren't going around looking for fights. Nunchucks take this to the next level. Some of the common techniques or routines for them can vary from flashy all the way up to very flashy. Twirling your nunchucks around like some karate enthusiast juggler may only seem like you're peacocking, which you are, but you're still showing off your skills at the same time. Think of it like a martial arts version of stotting, a form of honest signaling wherein potential prey demonstrate their athletic ability to predators, sending the message that they're fit and won't be worth the effort to attack. The same goes for a flashy nunchuck routine. If someone threatens you and you go into a full-blown chain of twirls, rolls, and transfers, it sends the very clear message that you've spent a good deal of time and effort training with your weapons so you know how to handle things. Compare that with a defensive quarterstaff stance, where you stand still and simply hold your weapon static out in front of you. True, you'd still be wise to adjust positions in response to any movements made by your foe, and you can even twirl the staff around like you're a medieval fantasy Darth Maul, but it still won't be on the same level as someone with mad nunchuck skills. Another benefit to keeping the nunchucks in constant motion is that it serves to act as a rudimentary aerial denial strategy which can hold people at bay. If your weapon is essentially occupying the entire space immediately around you at all times, people will be unable or at least unwilling to enter that vicinity. In the world of modern self-defense and everyday carry, derringers and other small-caliber pocket pistols are sometimes referred to as get-off-me guns. You don't care about one-hit kills or stopping power at 100 yards, you just want the person attacking you at arm's length to not be there anymore, and to that end a 32 is as good as a 45, and nunchucks are as good as a quarterstaff. But let's say all of these fast, flashy moves fail to dissuade your attacker. Now what? We already established that the quarterstaff is an incredibly versatile weapon due to its simplicity, and the same is more or less true for nunchucks as well. Both weapons use a basic construction with no sharp edges, allowing them to be less lethal weapons which still maintain lethal options for attacks. This, additionally, means that there's no edge alignment to worry about, making a variety of attacks possible from many positions. From this starting stance, for example, Bruce can release his left hand and make a downward strike with his right, but he could also just as easily release his right grip to execute an upward or lateral swing with his left. Or kick you, because come on, this is Bruce Lee we're talking about here. The main way in which nunchucks and a quarterstaff differ is that nunchucks are shorter and have a chain in the middle. Duh. All joking aside, the decreased length and increased wiggliness in the middle does limit their practicality as tools when not being used as weapons. Unlike the staff, they can't be used as a walking stick or a tent pole, for example, so they won't be very useful outside of combat unless you've got a dire need to thresh rice. As a logical consequence of this, they also can't be hidden in plain sight as something else, like the quarterstaff could. On the other hand, they can be much more easily hidden out of sight. Simply fold them up and slip them into your back pocket or under your cloak, and the layman will be none the wiser. Remember, the quarterstaff only had to be disguised as a pedestrian walking stick because it couldn't be concealed. For nunchucks, disguise is a non-issue. Of course, the passive benefit of open carry with a quarterstaff is that it will deter brigands before they decide to attack you, but we've already established that nunchucks can be more than enough deterrent in their own way. They also may not be ready in your hand the instant you need them, like the staff, but the flip side of that is that you also don't risk putting them down somewhere and not being able to reach them when they're needed if they're tucked into your belt. The final, or perhaps I should say initial, benefit of the quarterstaff is that it's relatively easy to acquire. Nunchucks admittedly take a little more work to create, but that effort is basically nil compared to the work that goes into making a sword or a bow, for comparison. To give you some idea of just how easy it is to make an effective pair of combat-ready nunchucks, inmate Lorenzo Pollard made a pair in prison from chair legs and bedsheets, which he then used to fend off a dozen guards, smash through a security glass window, and escape to freedom. Don't worry, he was recaptured again 2 days later, but the ad hoc nunchucks did their job admirably. Am I trying to argue that nunchucks are the perfect weapon for all situations? No. Of course not, because the perfect weapon for all situations doesn't exist. It all depends on context. The weapon you'd use to dissuade brigands from mugging you in a dark alley is not the same weapon you'd use to fight a dragon, which is not the same weapon you'd use to mug someone in a dark alley. Nunchucks have a bit of a reputation as being flashy but impractical, but if you're a traveler who wants something that's easy to acquire, easy to carry, folds discreetly away when not in use, makes a big impression when it is in use, and isn't highly deadly but can still lay down the law, then nunchucks may be the perfect weapon for you. Is there a better choice, though? Instead of taking the quarterstaff or nunchucks and pointing out all the things that make them good weapons for travelers, let's start with the goal and work our way backwards. If I'm just a traveler in a typical pseudo-medieval fantasy setting, then that means I'm more interested in avoiding combat than seeking it out, so I'll want something which is more defense-oriented. Therefore, a big shield or two and a full suit of armor is the ideal tool for the job, right? Wrong. First of all, the perfect defensive weapon is the one you never have to use, and if I'm hoping not to use it, I want it to be as inexpensive as possible. A bespoke suit of armor is anything but. Secondly, I'm on the move, so I don't want to have to hike for miles in a suit of armor or while carrying a big, heavy shield, especially if I hope not to use it. It's clear that we can also add cheap and lightweight to our list of features. So what's defense-oriented, lightweight, and cost-effective? The obvious answer is spear and shield, but if we're more concerned about weight savings than surviving a full-scale medieval battle, we can ditch the shield. This leaves us with a spear, which is just a quarterstaff with a blade on the end, and we're right back where we started. Basically, if you want a weapon which is light, affordable, and handy in a pinch, go for the quarterstaff, but if it has to be convenient and concealable too, a pair of nunchucks is the next best thing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.